in bed, because that's what happens before you get up. And the amazing thing was what Dare and Helen have said, is that today, we're here for, a couple of hours, before we go home. And then we've got about 166 hours before we meet again. That means we've got to do an awful lot in this meeting to equip us for the extra 166 hours. And so this is no sort of small thing. This is a big thing, for us to be together, because we're not going to get corporate worship for another 165 hours. Yeah? So we really need to do whatever we need to do, in this period of time. So there we are. I just thought I'd tell you that before I continue. Okay, then. We're continuing with this theme of Jesus the showstopper. That's my line. Jesus the game changer, okay? And we're looking at that because Jesus changes lives, and Jesus changes our lives, and Jesus does amazing things, within our hearts and within our lives. And one of the greatest pleasures that I have is going to sleep in the sound of the sea. I found that I had this gift. Just after we were married, we were in Porthcawl, and we were up on Lochs Common, and the sun was shining, the wind was blowing, because it always blows in Porthcawl. And I was in the car, and before long, bonk, I'd just gone. I was just fast asleep, and I was absolutely loving it. And that's it for me. Deck chair, not too warm, little breeze, wonderful sound of the sea, and that's it. I'm relaxed, I'm away, and I'm loving it. Yeah, I'm absolutely loving it. I'd like to read a portion of the Bible this morning from Mark chapter 4. By the way, the title of my sermon this morning is Simply Amazing. Jesus, the game changer, simply amazing. And I'd like to read a portion of this to you this morning from Mark chapter 4. It's not going to come up on the screen, but there are some salient points when I get onto the first point. Mark chapter 4, verse 35. That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, this is Jesus, let's go over to the other side of the lake. Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him up and said to him, Teacher, don't you care if we drown? He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, Quiet, be still. And then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? They were terrified and asked each other, Who is this, that even the wind and the waves obey him? In Mark chapter 4 and verse 35, we see that Jesus is going to sleep in the sound of the sea. Just like me. I go to sleep in the sound of the sea. And Jesus went to sleep in the sound of the sea. He wasn't reclining in the deck chair. It wasn't a little breeze. It wasn't warm. It was dark, and the sound of the sea was deafening. The boat was rocking fiercely in the middle of a savage storm that threatened to sink it. It was so ferocious that Peter and John, seasoned sailors, struggled to keep down the sail. Matthew, ex-tax collector, a non-sailor, struggles to keep down his breakfast. So there's an awful lot of stuff which is going on here. The storm was not what he bargained for at all. How do you fall asleep during a storm like that? But Jesus went to sleep on purpose. Verse 38 tells us he was sleeping on a cushion. And he moved to the stern where he could stretch out and get comfortable. So Jesus goes to sleep on a cushion because he intends to go to sleep. He intends to have a nap. And that's what he planned to do. So I really want to look at Jesus this morning because Jesus, the game changer, and he's simply amazing. I want to tell you something this morning. Jesus is simply amazing. That's what it's about. It is really about that. And my first point is, amazing works. He does amazing works. In the boat that night, Jesus wanted to test what they would trust. He wanted to see if they would trust what he had said more than the circumstances around them. Catherine, can you put up the next, whatever it is, slide? Amazing works. There we are. Jesus had already told them what they were going to do. He said, we are going over to the other side of the lake. That's his promise. We are going over to the other side of the lake, knowing full well that that is my promise, that is my intention. We're going over to the other side of the lake. He has no other plan. He's going over to the other side of the lake. He wanted to see if they would trust that more than the storm which was coming around them. He said, let's cross over to the other side of the lake. He did not say, let's row to the middle of the lake and sink and drown. That would be a different kettle of fish. But he said, we're going over to the other side, and nothing is going to stop his plan. Therefore, he can go to sleep. The disciples heard his words, but they missed the promise. You know, folks, it is so easy for us to hear the words of Jesus. It is so easy to read the Bible and to miss the promise. Though we know what it says, but it has no relevance to us. We've almost like acquired a Teflon anointing where it slips off us so that we don't get any further. The disciples had heard his words. They missed the promise. So his nap, his sleep troubled them. And Matthew and Mark record their response. They say, Teacher, don't you care that we're perishing? They don't ask about his strength. Jesus, can you still this storm? They didn't ask about his strength. They didn't ask about his knowledge. Are you aware of this storm? Jesus, you're asleep. Are you aware what we're going through? They didn't ask about his know-how. Jesus, we've seen you with the lepers. We've seen you the demon-possessed. Are you any good with storms? They didn't ask him about that either. Instead, they raised out about his character. They went straight for his character. They didn't ask what he could do. They asked him, well, don't you care? Don't you care that we're perishing? Isn't your heart towards us then? They didn't ask what he could do. They didn't ask about his strength. They didn't ask about his knowledge. They didn't ask about his know-how. Instead, they cast doubts about his character. Don't you care? Don't you care? In the boat, Jesus was asleep. The disciples were in meltdown. Jesus wanted the disciples to trust that he was in control. Folks, you know, this is the big issue for probably, there's going to be a well-being course which is going to be coming along. Let me just tell you the biggest issue with well-being. We want to be in control. We want to be our own game changer. If you're suffering from anxiety, worries, concerns, cares, or anything else, problem is that you probably want to be in control. The disciples on that night, they wanted to be in control. We want to be in control of this storm. We don't want to be swamped. We want control. He wanted them to realize that they're not in control, but that he is in control. And you see, the only way that Jesus is going to be your game changer is when you allow him to be in control. That's the only time that he will be the game changer. If you want to be in control, you're your game changer. And that's why we get anxiety. And that's why we get nervous. And that's why we worry. And that's why we can't sleep. And that's why we go into meltdown when we're in the middle of a storm, because of the fact that we want to be in control. That's not the way that Jesus has got it planned. Because Jesus is in control, they didn't need to fear the waves because he was with them. They needed to learn this lesson in the storm. Not by looking at the storm through binoculars from the shore. They had to be in the storm to be able to learn the lesson. It's a shame that Jesus does that with us, isn't it really? He says, I'm going to teach you a lesson, you have to go through the storm. Oh, hang on a minute, Jesus, don't fancy that. You see, when safety becomes our God, fear corrodes our confidence. When we worship fear, when fear is telling us what to do, Jesus is not Lord, fear is. And it corrodes our confidence in God's goodness. We begin to wonder if he really loves us, just like the disciples. Don't you care? Don't you know what I'm going through? Don't you care about me? You see, if he can go to sleep in the middle of the storm, and when he asks us to come on his boat and go into the middle of the storm, does he really care? You see, fear unleashes doubts, and it unleashes anger too. It turns us into control freaks. Do something about the storm, because we've got to get control back. Fear is at its center a perceived loss of control. So we grab for a component that we can manage. Our goal, we want to be our own game changer. We want to be in control. We want to be self-sufficient. We want to be able to do everything that we need to do to get us out of the situation. And Jesus says, I got news for you boys. If I'm going to be the game changer, you've got to let me. You've just got to let me. Fear deadens our recall. The disciples had reason to trust Jesus. They'd seen him healing all kinds of sickness and all kinds of diseases among the people. Matthew 4:23. They witnessed him heal a leper with a touch and speak the words over a distance for a servant to recover. We find that in Matthew chapter 8. Peter saw his sick mother-in-law recover, Matthew chapter 8 again, and they all saw demons cast out really easily. He casts out the spirits with a word, and he heals all those who are sick. They've seen him do all of that. But they forgot. Because in the middle of the storm was more important than Jesus. At that moment, they wanted to be the game changer. And Jesus says, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Fear creates a form of spiritual amnesia. It dulls our miracle memory. It makes us forget what Jesus has done and how good God is. Do you know there's a song, it's an old song, probably nobody knows it. I only know it because I've heard it. I've never sung it ever in my life in congregational worship. But these are the words it says, could we with ink the oceans fill? Does anybody know this? Yeah? Could we with ink the ocean fill, and with a sky of parchment made, and every stalk, every blade of grass, and every stalk become a quill, and every man a scribe by trade. To write the love of God above would drain the ocean dry. Nor could the scroll contain the whole, though stretched from sky to sky. Do you know the words of that song? They were written by a man who was supposed to be insane. I tell you what, he's probably the sanest man that ever lived. Could we with ink the ocean fill, and the sky be made of parchment, and every blade of grass become a pen, and every man becomes a writer, and they go and they write the words, the love of God on the sky, and you know, you run out of sky and you run out of ocean because his love is just so incredible. That's our God, folks. That's our game changer. A God who loves us absolutely incredible. When fear shapes our lives, safety becomes our God, and then we worship the risk-free life. The safety lover cannot do anything great for God and for others, so Jesus had to deal with that in them, and he also deals with it in us. After stilling the storm, all three synoptic writers, as Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they all say the same thing. They were terrified and asked each other, who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. That's Jesus, the game changer. Or perhaps not. Because in a later incident, Jesus comes out to meet them by walking on the Sea of Galilee. Now that's a good one too. Ever tried that one? He comes out walking to them on the Sea of Galilee, Mark 6:45. And we are told that they are amazed. Why were they amazed? And Jesus tells us. Because they didn't understand the significance of the first feeding miracle. You remember he fed 5,000 people? Jesus tells them, you were amazed at me walking on the water because you didn't understand what I did when I fed the 5,000. Do you know, that amazes so many Christians. I never saw that in the Bible. You know, it's been there for 2,000 years. But the reason that they were amazed at Jesus walking on the water was because they didn't understand what he did when he fed the 5,000. He says to them that your hearts were hard. You couldn't get a grip of what I was doing because your hearts were so hard. You missed the significance of the feeding of the 5,000. So when I came walking to you on the water, you were amazed. But you shouldn't have been because you saw what I did then. But then in another incident, when they're having this little bit of an argument about the yeast of the Pharisees and everything else like that, they're having an argument, and Jesus again rebukes them. And he says, the reason that you didn't understand what's going on here is because you didn't understand the second feeding miracle. And you can find that in Mark chapter 8, whatever it is, 8:17. Because they didn't understand the significance. What's the point am I trying to say? The point that I'm trying to say is that what we take on board is necessary to take us into the next step. And that's why this meeting and all the other church meetings are just so important, because if you don't get something which is going to be said here today, you might realize that something which is going to come to you in the future, you won't be able to get because you didn't get this bit. We are told to add to our knowledge. We are told to grow all the time. And what Jesus is saying is exactly that. Jesus could not be their game changer because they weren't getting the truth into their hearts and within their lives. It was a huge, huge problem to them. Jesus' disciples did what we often do when we go to church. We listen to a sermon, participate in a Bible study, read the scriptures. We often hear the message without applying the meaning. Jesus said, we're going over to the other side. We're not going to go to the middle of the lake and sink and drown. We're going over to the other side. They heard those words, but they didn't appropriate them. Therefore, they got worried. Jesus is not ordinary. That's a very profound statement this morning. Jesus is not ordinary. Everything about what we believe is supernatural. Everything. Everything about what we believe is supernatural. Jesus is not ordinary. Please, I just want to get that across this morning. Jesus goes and heals a leper. How many lepers does he being healed? Or anything else? Jesus comes along and he just does it. Just like that. He casts the demons out. He walks on the water. He stills the storm. He does all of these sort of things. Everything about it. Being born again is not natural. It is absolutely, completely supernatural. When I got born again, Jesus transferred me from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of the Son he loves. How long did it take him to do that? That long. That long. Because that's what God does. He is absolutely mighty. And when Dale said this morning about coming to church excited, we should be so excited. We've had the most awful week. Absolutely awful week. And we're still thrilled with God. I'll tell you why. Because he's amazing. Simply amazing. This Jesus that we talk about is absolutely amazing. He's a game changer. He's the game changer. But not if we can't take it in. He's Lord, he's in charge, he's amazing, he's all of those things. But if we become too familiar with him, we lose out on it. Let me read you a story this morning, very quick story. Mark Galley was a pastor in Sacramento, and they had some refugees from Laos. They only had a basic understanding of Christianity, so he taught them by going through Mark's gospel. When they came to this passage, that's the passage about stilling the storm, he tried to steer them into an allegory about the storms that they experience in their lives. But they were having none of it. They started chatting among themselves in Lao and eventually said, did Jesus really calm the storm with a word? And Galley said, yes, he did. And this time they went into even more excited chattering in their native language. And then after they finished, one of them said, because they were just so excited, they said, this Jesus must be a very powerful person. And Mark Galley said, yes, he is. And then they went back into this incredible excitement about what Jesus did in the boat. And they were just so excited about it. And Mark Galley said, the room was filled with awe and wonder. Except for me. Except for the pastor. These rudimentary believers, these baby believers were so excited about Jesus calming the storm with a word. But he wasn't. Because he was so familiar with it all that it meant nothing to him. So familiar. Gally said his unbelief and his familiarity with the story came to the surface. And this is what he said, his words. He concluded that they understood the story better than him. Folks, we've read this story this morning. Are you excited? Is the room filled with awe and wonder about this? You see, this is what it's about, isn't it, really? We get so familiar with this simply amazing Jesus, with this awesome God, who is totally spectacular, who is absolutely wonderful and gracious and loving and merciful. You know, last week I said when I led communion that God could have wiped me off the face of the earth 20 billion times. But he didn't, because of his grace and because of his mercy. And because of that, I am so blessed. But this is what it's about, you see. Jesus, the game changer, he will only be the game changer when we get so thrilled with him, when we're so trusting in him. Because, you know, one of the things which happens to human beings is that we become so familiar with them that they lose their wonder and awe. What Mark Gally found out to his horror was that the baby Christians had more faith and understood the story than he did. It's time to get it back. We want breakthrough. We want breakthrough. Helen said we want breakthrough. Breakthrough doesn't come and be comfortable. Breakthrough comes and does something incredible. I probably told you before, when we were at Batley, we ended up with 6 meetings on a Sunday. Because we had breakthrough. Because we had breakthrough. Because Jesus is just so exciting. Let me just finish my first point. Second point is a lot easier than this. If Jesus is the game changer, we can't be. We can't be. Second point. Jesus, the game changer, amazing person. We become our own game changer when we forget the omnipotence into which we were born and become comfortable. If you don't realize it, if you believers here this morning, if you don't realize that we were born into omnipotence because we became children of God, and we become comfortable, and we settle down, and we become stuck, and we become complacent. But we become our own game changer then. Shocking things, amazing things happen in our world. I'm sure that we've heard the news this week. You know, we've seen some of the things on the news. 23 of the 24 children were killed in a nursery in Thailand. That's shocking. If Vladimir Putin decided to lob a nuclear device onto New York, that would be shocking. We see some shocking things taking place in the world. We also see some amazing things in the world. But let me give you a piece of news this morning which is more shocking and more amazing. God became a baby. That's incredible. God, who created the universe, throws the stars into space, holds them there by the power of his word, became man. That's incredible. That's amazing. Oh, excuse me a moment while I pour the entire Pacific Ocean into a milk bottle. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. The birth of Jesus is awesome. The prophet Isaiah says, all right then, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Look, the virgin will conceive a child. She will give birth to a son, and you will call him Emmanuel, which means God is with us. A pregnant virgin. A pregnant virgin. That's an oxymoron. You can't get one. A pregnant virgin. You can hear the rumblings of the Israelites as Isaiah promised. Incredible. The virgin will conceive and become pregnant. You must be joking. How does that work? I guess this morning, that we hear and we all know about it, and it doesn't sort of blow us away. It should blow us away. Today, those words should still be uncomfortable to us. For a start, virgins don't get pregnant. For a second, it was prophesied 700 years before it happened. And third, God with us is no small potatoes. And so fourthly, from that moment on, the world will never be the same again. Oh, you don't look thrilled. You really don't look thrilled. Because this is astonishing. This is astonishing. Does it sound incredible? Does it sound strange? It should. Because it's a sign from the Lord himself. It should be a showstopper. It was meant to be. This was no secret birth, no private hidden away moment. He meant it to cause wonder. He made for people to shake their heads in wonder. He made for the room to go quiet. God is about awe. He's about wonder. He's the God of miracles who displays his power among the people, Psalm 77. He does outrageous work in ways that make the so-called wise chuckle at the absurdity. I will astound these people with wonder upon wonder. The wisdom of the wise I will perish. The intelligence of the intelligent will vanish. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 19. If the nativity, if the birth of Jesus sounds unbelievable to you, it's okay. Because it was meant to be astonishing. It also means that God did exactly what he set out to do. He set out to create a story that could not depend upon human wisdom. The ways of God are unlike ours. He is able to do abundantly more than anything we could think or imagine. He outdoes our wildest imagination. He doesn't stick with our systems and strategies. He remains outside of us and is very near to us. As tempting as it is to wrap the nativity up into a comfy, digestible way and pretend it makes sense, don't. Please don't. Because it doesn't make sense. In doing so, we miss the whole point of God's powerful sign. He doesn't expect us to pretend that his outrageous sign of God becoming a baby is normal. Instead, he wants to reveal the overwhelming, excessive lengths he went to impress us with this sign. God became a baby. If that makes sense to you, if you can normalize that, if you can make it sound like it happens every day, then the power, the majesty, the awesomeness of God breaking into human history has been totally lost. And we can reduce the celebration of the birth of Jesus to, well, Christmas is for the children. Christmas is, I enjoyed Christmas. I had everything and my parents had nothing. How I managed to have everything when they had nothing, I haven't got a clue. But Christmas, we celebrate that time of the year, and yet, sometimes it just goes, God became a baby. The awesomeness of God becoming a baby just gets lost amongst the turkey and 26 veg. God became a man is beyond understanding. It's amazing. It's jaw-dropping. It's not natural. It's majesty in the manger. It's God on a megaphone declaring his love to us. It is so awesome and amazing, the world would never be the same again. God with us. Jesus, the game changer. Sometimes the only response to God's unbelievable solutions is to fall on our face and to be amazed. We do not have, nor could we ever properly explain God's ways, and this is one of them. All we can do is stand in awe. Losing our awe, losing our excitement, losing our thrill about a supernatural God who shouts on a megaphone and says, I love you, is the first step to us becoming our own game changer. When Mark Galli's group heard about the resurrection, they were even more unmanageable. They were even more unmanageable when it came to that. Graves opened up and men walked out. There was an earthquake, darkness covered the earth, and a dead crucified Jesus came out of the tomb, walked through walls and ate food. How many done that this week? Anybody done that? Because we talk about it as if it's like that. And when they realized what Jesus accomplished on the cross, well, you would be unmanageable too, wouldn't you? This man dies for your sin, sets you free, gives you eternal life. This is astonishing. This is amazing. This is wonderful. It's life-changing. Why? Because it's Jesus, the game changer. He changes everything. We can't become too familiar. We can't dumb it down. The truth of Easter is amazing. Okay, let's round it off. We live with the challenges and the frenzy of the world. And so someone has to take charge of our lives. Why not us? Why don't we do it? We're here. In doing so, we become so used to what we believe that it carries absolutely little power. Just like Mark Galli found out about it. Read about, he taught some rudimentary Christians about Jesus stirring the storm with a word. And the only person in the room that wasn't impressed was him. Are you impressed this morning? Are you impressed with Jesus? Or shall we change his name to Joe Ordinary? Because that's what it means. We are dealing with something here. We are dealing with someone here who is far greater than us and loves us far more than we can possibly imagine. Who is so great and so wonderful, so merciful, so kind, so absolutely fantastic. Let's not dumb it down, folks. Let's make him just so fantastic in our lives by realizing that he's amazing. Oh, I'm sorry. I just think that it's just that Mark Galli incident where he said that the room was filled with awe and wonder except for me. And I'm teaching it. And that they understood the story better than I did. Oh, you want breakthrough? Church wants breakthrough. You're not going to get it by being comfy. Not going to get it by being cozy. You're going to get it by being absolutely besotted with the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, who is going to be so amazing in your life that he will do absolutely anything he tells you to do. That he will break up our comfort and we say, thank you very much. Because just to serve you is just incredible. I've got to say this. You remember the story about Isaiah? He sees the Lord high and lifted up and his train fills the temple. And he realizes that he's a man standing in front of a holy God. And he sees these six-winged cherubim above him. With two they covered their faces, two covered their feet, and two they were flying. And he sees this cherubim getting a tongs and getting a burning coal from the altar. And he sees it coming towards him and towards his mouth. And he's saying to himself, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. And then the angel takes the coal in his hand and he plucks it on his lips and he says, see, your sin is atoned for, your guilt is atoned for, you're going to be okay. And Isaiah says, I'm not dead. I'm not dead. And then God says, well, who shall I send and who shall go for us? Loaded question, because there's only him there. Who shall I send and who shall go for us? And Isaiah says, here I am, send me. Let me just tell you about that story. So often we want to do the send me before we do the here I am. When we meet Jesus like that and we realize that our lives have been spared, because my life has been spared, I'm not going to go to hell. Jesus Christ has saved me. And when I realize that fact, when I come to the fact of here I am, folks, we need to get back to the here I am and meet him in his awesomeness and his power and his glory and his might and his tremendousness. And then we say, send me. I don't care what the message is. I don't care how stinking the message is. I don't care how difficult the message is. I don't care what it is. Because I've met with a king. And that's what it's all about. Okay, let me finish. Sorry, my little digression. I've really tried to stick very close to my notes this morning, which is absolutely tightened me up a little bit with my, It's important that Jesus is the game changer, not me the game changer. We were never meant to be in charge. We were never meant to be in control. Jesus Christ is Lord. Lord means Lord. He is almighty. He is the game changer. When that happens, things happen. Going back to the incident in the boat. In the boat that night, although they didn't get it straight away, they became aware that Jesus was more unmanageable than the storm. He controlled it, and they couldn't control him, which is good, because we don't need a God that we can control. We need to realize that wherever we are in, he can ultimately control it, so we can rest, rather than trying to take control. Simply amazing. Jesus is, after all, the game changer. Let's pray. Lord, you've heard hearts this morning.